Hi, my name is Michael Seiler, and I'm here to share with you the results of a study I published in the Journal of Real Estate Research titled, "Do As I Say, Not As I Do: The Role of Advice versus Actions in the Decision to Strategically Default." So let me first define what strategic default is. An economic default is when you simply cannot afford to make your mortgage payments and therefore you stop making them. A strategic default is when you decide consciously that although I can afford to continue making my mortgage payments, for either economic or financial reasons, I decide it's not in my best interest to keep doing that. So that's a strategic default. Now, let me back up and talk about this advice versus action.
And you have your gold mug, remember?
Every one of us as social creatures learns by observing the behavior of others. It's called social learning. So I learn how to do things by watching other people do them. That makes perfect sense. I also can learn decisions by asking other folks advice. Maybe I want to know what restaurant is best, so I read a review or ask my friends what they think. Same thing with watching a movie. So every one of us learns from both advice and action. The strategic default decision is incredibly complicated. So the question becomes, how do people decide that they're going to or not going to strategically default? Does it come more from listening to other people or watching the behavior of others? And so that's what this study is all about. To answer the question, I took this private signal between advice and action, and I tested the signal across a number of different variants. It's a web-based experiment with 1,539 homeowners from across the country. En route to doing this, what I wanted to know is not just who follows advice or action, but is this more of an information cascade, or is this more of a herding behavior? So let me define those two terms for you. An information cascade eventually results where all the people do the same activity. But importantly, the difference is that they have a private signal and they ignore that private signal and follow the actions of others anyway. Herding is different. Financial herding is when you receive a private signal, you do consider the information in that signal, but you decide that you're going to go with the herd anyway, you're going to follow everyone. Now, why is that important? Well, the reason why that's important is because with herding, because you have considered your private signal, if a new private signal comes, that might change your mind. You might break away from the herd, and then the herd will no longer happen. So a herd, as opposed to an information cascade, is much easier to break. And this is important from a policy perspective because the government, if they want to stem the tide of these strategic mortgage defaults, it will mean that it's easier for them if in fact it is herding behavior. So here's what we find. We find that, as in the title, "Do As I Say, Not As I Do," that people are more likely to follow advice than they are to follow the actions of others. And then we say, okay, well, within advice, we understand that's a more powerful private signal, but would it matter who it's coming from? So what if we have a private signal that comes from a real estate attorney who is going to coach you through the strategic default process? Would you be more likely to follow that person, or would you be more likely to follow maybe someone, a friend of yours, who has gone through the process themselves and can tell you more from an emotional perspective, which they would do? And what we find is that the relative strength, surprisingly, is very much equivalent. A professional real estate attorney who has looked at your specific financial situation and advised you to do one or the other, you will follow just as readily as an individual friend of yours who has gone through it themselves. And that's very important because a lot of people who go through strategic mortgage default never consult the advice of an attorney. Those are the highlights of the study. If you want to read more, please go to our website. Thank you.